A big question I had from the beginning of Lance's diagnosis was, how much information should I share? Everyone's experience is going to be different. Some people are going to share everything. Some will share a little bit. Some will share nothing. We all need to figure out what works best for us. So in this episode, I want to talk a little bit about how I figured that out.
It's such an interesting thing to me because I tend to be an oversharer. I was thinking about this and wondering, gosh, that can't possibly be the same for everyone. And it can't possibly be the same even throughout, particularly a long term illness. So it made me kind of wonder how you navigate what to share, when to share, all those things. So was it for you guys, was it something that changed? I'm guessing it changed throughout the course of his illness because he was sick for such a long time.
Yes, it changed a lot. I feel like we went through three stages of that. In the beginning, Lance was still working. He was sick, but he was still working, and he was able to make those decisions for himself. And he was very private about being sick. He didn't really like people to know. So we kept a very tight circle of family and really close friends that we shared information with. And I kind of left it up to him what he felt comfortable sharing because it was his illness. Most of his coworkers didn't even know that he was sick. And it was hard for me to know how to ask for support during that time because he was so private. I wanted to respect his privacy, so I didn't share a lot. And I think that made it harder for people to understand really how difficult it was for me, what I was going through. But by the time he had to quit working at the age of 37, it was obvious to everyone that there was something wrong with him because that's pretty young to have to quit working. That was his permanent retirement. So during those first two phases, we kept people informed in person or through the telephone. After his health changed drastically and I became his legal guardian, I turned to social media for most of my updates. I still kept family and really close friends updated, usually text messaging, but the rest I notified people on social media.
I can see that that was such a different process for you throughout his illness, kind of determining not just what to share, but who to share it with and when to share those things. It seems like it's very complex. I know for me in my life, I've not dealt with that specifically, but just even other things, trials of life. You maybe don't know, is this something I should share with my friends? Is it not? Should I share with family? And so I think navigating that anyway can be challenging, but even more so when you're dealing with someone who has an illness and it's very, very personal to them. Um, did you, I know I've screwed it up plenty of times and shared things with people that maybe the other person wouldn't have approved of. And that's been a hard thing for me over the years to get that right. Not because I'm being disrespectful, but because like I said, I'm a bit more of an open book. And so I don't think about, oh, maybe that person wouldn't have wanted me sharing that. Did you ever get it wrong? Was that ever like how did that learning curve transpire for you? Was it something that you had to learn or did you kind of have an idea from the beginning?
Well, I'm pretty private too, but there were times that I did screw up because I needed support. And like I've already said, it was hard for people to understand what I was going through because I wasn't sharing a lot about what was going on in our life. And so there were a couple of times that I shared something that Lance was not happy that I shared. And we ended up having to have conversations about it. And basically, what it boiled down to was even though he was the one who was sick, it was happening to both of us. And I needed support just as much as he did. And so I still tried to be as respectful to him as I could be. But I needed to be able to share a little bit with my friends, my close friends, so that I could get the support that I needed.
I think that's a really interesting point. And would you say that when that happened, maybe he hadn't thought about it from that perspective, and just as maybe you hadn't thought about how that might impact him, and just that open line of communication was the thing that helped you guys navigate that?
Yes, I would definitely say that it was great for us to be able to share what was on each of our minds so that the other one could understand. That was really, really important. There's something else too. I had a friend who he just recently passed away, but he had the same blood cancer that Lance did. And he was married, and he and Lance actually became friends too. And they would talk. They talked for a few years, and then Lance was not able to communicate as well. And so I continued communication with this friend, and it was such a unique situation. And I got so much out of that because he was able to share with me his experience of what it was like to be a man with a disease and be young and to not be the provider for the family that he felt that he should be, and all of the things that he experienced. And then on the other hand, I was able to share with him what it was like to be the spouse of someone who was sick and the support that I needed. And I'm so thankful for that friendship because we both learned a lot, and it helped us both in our relationships with our spouses.
That's a pretty incredible gift that you had that opportunity. Very, very cool. And I'm really glad that you took advantage of that and said, here's somebody that can express this to me and help me understand my spouse. And you were able to share something that helped him understand his spouse. So that was very cool.
It wasn't even anything that we realized in the beginning. It was as we started those deeper conversations that we realized we were seeing the perspective of our own spouse in the person that we were talking to. It was very cool.
Wow. That's that's incredible. So let's talk about um kind of the transition. So when Lance was sick, well, from the time he was diagnosed is really when I would say as a society, we kind of made the transition from phone calls and emails to texts and social media, and kind of changed the landscape of how we connect and share information. Like all that was happening as he was sick. So thinking about the shift into social media, do you feel like that made the process of sharing information easier because you could reach a broad audience all at once, or harder because it you weren't able to differentiate between this group or that group getting this information or that information? Like, did that complicate it or did it simplify it?
Well, social media was just starting when he had to quit working. And then when I became his legal guardian, people were using it a little bit more. I was still very private at that time, not really sharing. So in the beginning, I didn't really share a lot. It wasn't until a few years into that, maybe the last 7 or 8 years of his life, that I did use social media, and it did make it easier for me. I had to look at it as, this is something that I'm going to share with this big group of people. I need to make sure it's something that he doesn't care that the whole world knows. Even though it was on a private page, people can share things. When I first started doing that, it was a little bit more challenging because I didn't have the time to communicate individually with people anymore. And so I started posting things on social media, and I did get several people upset with me because I wasn't giving them that individual attention that they felt they needed to know what was going on in our life. And I just had to make the decision to say, this is what works for us. I'm sorry if it doesn't work for you, but I can't accommodate everybody else. So sorry.
Wow, I hadn't thought about that. Just people being offended, basically, that they, and I've heard people say that I had to find out on Facebook or I had to find out on Instagram. And I've thought when I hear people say that, I've thought, well, perhaps you need to reevaluate your relationship with that individual because maybe it's not what you thought it was, or maybe it's not what they think it is. And so I always think that's interesting when people say that. And I've heard it a lot over different things. But I hadn't thought about that.
I wouldn't even say that it's necessarily the relationship that you have with that person, because by at that point, we were barely talking to anybody on the phone anymore, just our parents, I think. And there was so much going on in our life. We didn't have the time, and I didn't have the energy. So it had nothing to do with the relationship that I had with anyone else. It had to do with what was going on in our home and what we needed to do to make it work for us.
So it was purely an hours in the day kind of situation where it's like, I don't have time to call everyone individually and give them this information. So it has to be transmitted this way and
Right.
delivered in that way.
Right. And you share it with one person and you don't share it with another person, and they hear that you talk to them. I mean, it just kind of spirals out of control. So just to simplify it, that's what I did.
Okay, that makes me think of something else. I wondered this because I felt like in my own life, when I've gone through different challenging situations, there would be people that were there kind of for the show, right? They just want drama and they want to hear about the drama that's going on in everyone's lives. And they're not really that invested in being supportive to me or being an encouragement to me or even really being a part of my life. They just want to hear the drama or the tea, as my teenagers like to say. They want to hear the tea. And so I thought about that. You guys must have experienced people just there, with their popcorn watching a show. And how did you navigate that? I mean, well, I guess just did you know that was happening? Did you weed those people out? Like, how did you do that?
I did feel like that a lot. Like, it's like a train wreck or a car accident or something like that, where people just want to stop and look and see what's going on. And it did feel a lot of times like I was in a fishbowl, I guess, sharing my life and not really knowing what people thought. And at some point, I just had to say, I can't worry about it. If that's how people want to live their lives, then that's what they're going to do. I can't do anything about it. All I can do is manage what I'm managing here and share what I need to share. And if people get something out of it, great. If they want to be there to support us, that's even better. But I didn't have the time or the energy to be worrying about what it meant to everyone else. I was sharing it for the people who really wanted to know what was going on.
I think that's a great perspective. And perhaps I could have learned something from that because I would just get mad when people did that to me.
Well, I'm not saying that it never upset me. I mean, there were times when I shared things and I was like, does anybody even care? I don't know. There were plenty of times when it did bother me, but ultimately all that worry does is cause stress for me. It's not doing anything to solve the situation. So I had to just let it go.
That's probably the best way.
I think basically it just boils down to when you're struggling, when you're going through a difficult situation, whatever it is, you need to find the way that works for you. And you need to find your community of people who are going to be there to support you in the way that you need to be supported. It shouldn't have to be so difficult. And other people should not be putting their expectations on the people who are struggling. And I don't think that other people should be telling you how you should be communicating what it is that you need and what you should or should not be telling them.
I couldn't agree more. I think that is good advice for anyone going through anything, that this is your story to share. You get to decide how and when and to whom that story is shared and how much of that story is shared. So whether you're caring for a loved one, whether you're going through something difficult, perhaps it's a divorce, perhaps you're estranged from a child, perhaps you're having a child. I knew somebody that didn't share that she was pregnant until she had the baby. She would post on social media and have everything from here up, and only close friends and family knew. And at first I thought, well, that's odd. And then I thought, actually, that's wonderful because it's your story to share. And it's your story to just even to write. So I think that's perfect. And I think that's exactly right. And very, very pertinent to the experience of a caregiver.
And I think that if you're in a situation where you feel like you're getting too much information from somebody who is struggling, maybe it's time for you to step back from that relationship. Maybe this isn't the place. We've talked about that a lot, that maybe this isn't the time or the place for you to be. And maybe you're not meant to be in that person's life at this time. And that's okay. Well, thanks for joining me, Jenna, and I will see you next time.
All righty, we'll see you. Bye.